Hello you, welcome to Geekism and welcome back to Planet Zoo. Today we're doing another habitat speed build. Today we're taking a look at the Pygmy Hippos. These are adorable creatures. These are one of your deluxe animals. Deluxe. The wife keeps telling me off for saying deluxe. They're one of the deluxe animals that comes with the extended edition. There was the Pygmy Hippo, the Thompson's Gazelle, and the Komodo Dragon. And I wanted to look at one of them, and I wasn't too sure which one to go for, to be honest with you, until visiting Toronto Zoo the other day and seeing their Pygmy Hippo and kind of falling in love with it, and really thinking it had a lovely exhibit and just a really sort of nice manner about it. I spent quite a long time just sort of hanging out with him, to be honest, and just appreciating what an awesome little animal it is. So we're trying to build one here. It ends up being huge, and then we end up shrinking it down. It's quite one of the difficult things in this game, I think, is you kind of have to build the habitat space, put an animal in it, and then you can start tailoring it towards the animal. I mean, you can look at stuff on the Zoopedia and stuff, I guess, to kind of give an idea, but putting an animal into the habitat and then being able to click on it and it telling you how much of the space it's happy with is really the easiest way of doing it. What would be really nice is if you could sort of click a habitat and sort of earmark it and say, I'm going to put X animal in here, and then it starts letting you do that information before you have to have an animal running around and figuring itself out. So as you can see here, we're using mostly null fencing. I think most of my exhibits are going to be using null fencing, to be honest with you, because I much prefer the freedom and creativity of being able to create the exhibit enclosures using rock work, custom fences, things like that. Although I do realise the slight irony in sort of begging for fence tools in the Planet Coaster, and then when we get fence tools in Planet Zoo, very rarely using them. So as you can see there, just checking out space-wise, obviously it can break free from wherever there's null fencing, so we do have to go and sort of fix all that in. The style I'm going for here is pretty standard stuff here, African theme. Wanted to use some of the African pieces because it wasn't something that we really got in the beta, and they're really great. They go together really nicely. They look good. Very, very sort of quick to throw up something that looks really quite impressive using them. The thatch roofing looks great, and just in general, I just really appreciate the detailing on the pieces. African is definitely the most filled out theme in the game. There are around about double the African pieces than any other theme in the game. Now, a lot of pieces in the game are relatively generic, so even though some of them are tagged as African or Asian, you can pretty much use them for whatever you like. But as far as just sort of tagged pieces go, there are loads more African ones than there are any other theme, so you can definitely sell. And also a lot more animals, but you know, it is the part of the world where there are more animals, frankly, so you know, I kind of get why they focused on it. But hopefully, yeah, we start seeing some more sort of fleshed out areas of the world, both scenery wise and animal roster wise, with DLC later down the line. I'm sure we will. Pygmy Hippos then, so they basically look like little hippos. There are some differences though. They have sort of wider mouths, more bulbous noses. They do have that whole nose and ear thing closing for when they go underwater, but they're nowhere near as aquatic as their larger cousins, the river hippos or the common hippo, whatever you want to call it. They spend a lot of time in forests actually, so we try to do relatively dense forestry here, but one thing I did sort of take away from the Toronto Zoo was that a lot of their foliage was actually sort of surrounded by a fence, and I imagine that's there to basically stop the hippos damaging it, or you know, eating it, or just generally walking through it and pulling it to bits and stuff like that. So we do add one of those in, but then we do just do some light foliage around the pool as well. You can see I've made the whole thing a bit smaller here. I think it gets a bit smaller still later on, but yeah, at the moment we've sort of shrunk it down. And here, oh, that was a quick change, sorry, I might have cut away there, something happened, I guess. But yeah, there's a fence there that you'll see in a moment. Getting a guy over here just to kind of, oh yeah, this was a staff member who was clearing off. I wanted to do a custom bit of fencing. Again, this is based on the Toronto Zoo design. They have this sort of walkway across the end of the pond there with these glass panels, so that an adult can just sort of look over the top of the fence, but here kids are able to sort of get down and see through the glass at the Pygmy Hippos as they swim about, which they do a lot. Like I say, not quite as much as their larger counterparts, but they do a fair bit of swimming. They have they have a really interesting thing I was reading about Pygmy Hippos while I was building this, called blood sweat, which is the most metal thing I think I've ever heard of in the animal world. Basically, they have like a greenish black smooth skin that helps them keep cool in the sort of humid forests where they hang out, but it does mean that it can dehydrate very quickly when they're out in full sunlight, so they sort of create their own what's the word, suntan lotion. Basically they excrete this pinky fluids that looks like little beads of sweat all over them, and they call it blood sweat, which I think, well, they don't call it blood sweat, but we call it blood sweat, which is pretty crazy. There's actually not much else known about Pygmy Hippos. They're incredibly elusive. We didn't, as humans, didn't really know about them, or you know, Western science, I guess, didn't know about them until as late as 1840, actually, was the first documented one. And they didn't really start turning up in zoos until sort of like the early 1900s, which, in comparison to a lot of other animals, is actually really quite late. And even still now, they're not really studied in the wild much at all. Most of our knowledge as far as their habits and how they exist is based on the ones that are in zoos. So we probably have quite a misinformed idea of their sort of you know, breeding, eating, all that kind of stuff, because it's obviously often very different in a zoo as to how it is in real life. Now, in the Toronto Zoo, this bit of water here pretty much just gets boxed off. There's even just like a pipe squirting some water into the pool, to be honest. But, you know, we're in a video game. We're going to make some little waterfalls every now and again. We're going to make the thing look a little bit, maybe a little bit nicer than it would be in real life, because, you know, that's just the game doesn't really want you to make nasty, janky places. Now, I'm sure as I get in and once the sort of shiny new game has worn off a little bit, I do actually quite enjoy trying to jank it up a little bit and make it all look a little bit more realistic. But for now, while the game is fresh and I'm just sort of exploring the pieces, you know, it's quite fun to make stuff that's really sort of, you know, pretty and decorative and nice to look at. So here we so this ends up having no barrier at all. Basically, the concrete and the glass barrier there I'm having to use to keep the water in, because scenery doesn't keep water in, so I do have to use that. I was just having a look at that. It looks like that's changed a little bit from beta. I think they've changed the hole that it was in. Yeah, anyway, so I have to use that there, but otherwise I've covered all of it up, and obviously all around the back we do complete custom fencing that you'll see a little bit later on as well. And again, one thing I've really noticed looking at different zoos around the place is that they have these sort of multiple kicks. They really get their sort of money's worth out of each exhibit, and they have these multiple spots where animals can be seen from. So here we've got sort of a covered underwater viewing point here, which obviously works really well with hippos because they don't swim, but they hang around on the bottom of the water. They sort of sink down to the bottom and potter about for quite extended amounts of time. So we have these awesome underwater viewing, and then obviously the bridge itself you can stand over the top of, but then also around the back of the exhibit, I guess, looking at it from here, I did a custom fence and made a window in that custom fence as well, really quite low down, like the sort of awesome place that like little kids can run under and put their noses up against the glass. And that was kind of inspired a little bit by seeing Xander at the zoo. His first time, well, not really his first time at the zoo, but first time that he's really understood what's going on and what a zoo is, and he knows animal noises and stuff now, so that was kind of fun. But he really excited about getting down and close and trying to get in with the animals, basically. It was really quite sweet to see. So I'm going to try and replicate that a little bit here, which I hope I have time lapse of. Oh, here we go. Look at that. Perfect timing, Jonty. I'm doing it as we speak. So now I'm putting in some glass. We have to sort of sink it in a little bit because the actual physical barriers can't cross the paths, which I kind of get. It's, you know, just a limitation of the engine, I suppose. So we do have to sort of set it back a little bit there, whereas the null barriers, another reason why null barriers are my preferred choice is that you can pretty much put them where you like and then fake the barrier using things like this here. So you can make much more interesting looking fences. And that was another thing I noticed a lot in zoos. Looking not necessarily at Toronto Zoo so much, because I did find a lot of the cages there were just sort of metal cages, but a lot of sort of more modern structures, they have this sort of concept of if you can't hide it, then make a thing out of it, make a feature out of it. So if you can't hide the fencing or hide the barrier, I guess, through things like naturalistic barriers or hot wire or whatever, just make a feature out of it, make it a nice looking wall and make it a nice looking area for guests to hang around in. So that's kind of what I've gone for here, and you've got again a little bit of everything here with the barriers. So there's some regular rock work, there's the building obviously, there's this sort of funky fence with that low down viewing platform. I think that turned out really nice. I think I'm really happy with, I'll be honest with you, I'm really happy how this turned out. As awesome as I think the pandas were yesterday, they were the first Plan Zoo video I did. You know, it was big and ostentatious and I wanted to kind of make a mark with it. Actually, I think building something a little bit more on a smaller scale and really sort of making the most out of the room that we've got and the features that we've got is actually really a lot of fun, and I'm really quite happy with how this turned out. You've got to put a lot of stuff down. They want a lot of what's the word, enrichments, and again it's been confirmed now that zookeepers will prioritize food enrichment items over food trays, which basically means they never use food trays. Like there's almost no point in putting them down, unless I guess you've got a lot of animals where they feel like there needs to be a lot of food. But yeah, for the most part, they just don't really bother with it. That one's quite a fun one though. That's like a little thing that they sort of bat up to and get food out, and I thought it worked quite well. That's another sort of non-food enrichment one. That thing with the leaves there, I didn't actually see that happen. See them use it at all. So the guy was quite lonely. A boy on his own. He was quite lonely. So I got him a girlfriend. Then the space became a little bit too small. So you can. I'm going to try and put this one on the workshop. If it's in the workshop, there'll be a link in the description, so you can check it out yourself. On its own, they're not happy because they want to be in a couple, which is kind of right. They usually hang around either on their own or in pairs, I guess, in the wild, so that's kind of okay. But if you do have a pair of them, the whole thing is a little too small. So if you have a play around with this one, you can maybe make it a little bit bigger. But you see here they're hanging around in the water, and we had our first baby. Didn't even see it coming, didn't even notice the notification. Literally, I was filming the cinematic clips that you're watching here at the end, and I was just hanging around waiting for them to kind of do something. And yeah, you'll see this. Oh, look at the stinky food there. I think my keeper wandered off because I haven't got a staff room for them. But I got another one and changed it, don't worry. And the water's dirty as well. I forgot to put a water purifier down. You have to do loads. It's sandbox, man. We shouldn't have to worry about all that sort of stuff. But look at this little baby one. They have these gorgeous white cheeks, sort of white underbellies. How adorable. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Be good.